Members, in fact, we've already formed a quorum. It is also time to start, so I call the meeting to order. First of all, let's invite the administration's team to join us. Maybe at this juncture we can ask the deputations to join us as well. The deputations haven't arrived, or just two? It doesn't matter. We won't wait. We better make a start. Let me explain. Last time we thought that we have already dealt with the cross-by-cross scrutiny, but then all out of a sudden, some deputations, in fact, they are the mobile network operators. They have made a request to address us, and they would like to make submissions to us. I have read the request, and I believe that the request is related to the content of the regulations. So thank you for finding time to attend this meeting. First of all, on behalf of the subcommittee, I would like to thank the deputations. I would like to thank the government officials for your attendance at today's meeting. If necessary, you may want to put on the earpiece, but it appears that you don't need to. Channel 0 for floor, channel 1 for Cantonese, 2 for English, and then 3 for Putonghua. I would like to give the floor to the deputations. It appears that not all of them have come, but we are not going to wait. We'll make a start. We have already decided that each deputation should be given 5 minutes. We will keep to this time limit. Submissions have already been uploaded to the website. Members have received a copy, and the administration has also received a copy. So you don't need to repeat the entire submission. Of course, you can highlight what you want to emphasize. And then, in addition, I want to say that your written submission and your oral submission will not be covered by the provisions of the Legislative Council Powers and Privileges Ordinance. So please note that, and please do not speak in cocktail language, otherwise that will make interpretation difficult. First of all, I would like to give the floor to Mr. James Kong, China Mobile Hong Kong Company Limited.
We refer to the 3 regulations under the Telecommunications Ordinance, CAP 106, that were gazetted on 16 May 2014. And we, China Mobile Hong Kong Company Limited, have the following comments. Regarding the legislative amendment to Section 3 of the Telecommunications Method for determining spectrum utilization fee, administratively assigned spectrum in the 1.9 to 2.2 GHz band regulation, it reads, the spectrum utilization fee determined under this regulation is to be paid in a lump sum and payable at the time and in the manner required by the authority. The implication of such amendment to the successful bidder in the upcoming 3G spectrum auction is that though the successful bidder will obtain the same right to use the spectrum similar to the existing spectrum holders, a heavier tax burden will be imposed, and the successful bidder will have no right to obtain deduction for income tax purpose. Definitely, this will increase the economic cost significantly for the industry, putting pressure on future capex investment, and is very unfair, as we are talking about the same frequency spectrum to deliver similar service, but subject to a completely different tax treatment. Currently, spectrum holders are granted tax allowance for their 3G spectrum obtained in 2001. If no tax allowance is given for lump sum SUF payment, this will create inconsistency to tax treatment and ambiguity to the industry. By reason of the above, we respectfully disagree with what was stated in paragraph 11 of the Legislative Council brief document, that as to economic implications, while the legislative amendments themselves have minimal economic implication. Considering the material adverse impact on the industry, we have escalated this matter to OFCA earlier. Their response was that the assignment of frequency spectrum has no change in nature from that in day one, except that the government has amended the payment method from annual payment to lump sum payment, just for easy administrative reasons. With respect, we consider that the operators should not be unfairly penalized by taking away such right of tax deductibility with which the operators are currently entitled. Fairness and good administration would require that the same and consistent principles should apply in tax treatment, which is critical to Hong Kong's continued growth as a business and telecommunication hub in Asia. We are reluctant to see that, at the end of the day, the operator will pass such additional costs to the consumers, who will likely be the one to suffer from such inconsistent tax treatment. So to conclude, our positions can be summarized as follows. Firstly, we urge OFCA to liaise with ILD to obtain tax clearance on SUF so as to avoid inconsistent tax treatment. Secondly, payment term for SUF shall be reverted back to annual payment method, and it shall be clearly stated that such annual payment of SUF is deductible for profit tax purposes. Thirdly, the 3G spectrum auction to be conducted in the fourth quarter of the year shall be conducted as scheduled, and there should not be any undue delay. Thank you very much for your kind attention.
Thank you. Next, let us go back to the first organization listed on the list. That is the Hong Kong Telecommunications Limited. Mr. Low, please.
HKT objects to the government's proposal to set the minimum spectrum utilization fee payable by the 3G operators for their right of first refusal spectrum as 66,000 per kHz when the opening price for the forthcoming 3G spectrum auction is only 48,000 per kHz. Okay. By doing so, the government is discriminating against the existing 3G operators and directly favor any potential new entrants taking part in auction who may be able to obtain the 3G spectrum at a lower price via the auction as compared to the existing 3G operators who exercise their right of first refusal. This discriminatory result is now even more obvious given the market has just lost one licensee, that is CSL, and the spectrum auction will have two fewer bidders, HKT and CSL, are not permitted to participate. To ensure this fair play, the minimum SUF payable by the 3G operators for their right of first refusal spectrum should be set at the same level as the opening price for the spectrum to be auctioned, that is 48,000 per kHz. HKT notes that even at 48,000 per kHz, this price is still significantly higher than overseas benchmark for spectrum of this nature. For instance, Plum Consulting proposed a reasonable SUF to be set at 20,000 per kHz based on international benchmarks. Okay. Secondly, HKT also objects to the government's proposal to require operators to pay the SUF upfront in a one lump sum payment. Okay. When the 3G spectrum was first assigned in 2001, the SUF payable by the operators was spread over a period of 15 years, and the ILD treated this annual SUF payment as tax deductible because they were recurring in nature. Okay. For spectrum options which have taken place since 2001, however, the government changed the SUF payment basis from annual payment to an upfront lump sum. This was intended to reduce the administrative burden of the government in collecting and ensuring payment of the SUF. However, the underlying nature of the payment for the use of the frequency spectrum remained unchanged. Now, because the government changed in the SUF payment basis from annual payment to an upfront lump sum, this has resulted in unintended tax consequences. The ILD has regarded the nature of the SUF payment as changed from recurrent to non-recurrent, and this has resulted in the expenditure being treated as non-deductible capital expenditure for Hong Kong tax purpose. Okay. This sudden reversal of the position is clearly harsh and unnecessary. Because of the government's decision to change the SUF payment basis, each operator will now be required to incur a significant amount of additional tax, 16.5%, in respect of the SUF pertaining to spectrum awarded in auction going back several years. This additional tax cost would inevitably have to be passed on to the consumers. On this basis, HKT suggests that the SUF for the 3G spectrum and all other future auction spectrum be payable on an annual basis, so as to enable the SUF payments to continue tax deductible. Okay. Reverting back to the annual SUF payment would be consistent with the basis in which the SUF for the 3G spectrum was previously paid and the manner in which the 2G spectrum SUF payments were handled back in 2006 and 2009. It would also greatly ease the burden on each operator's cash flow, but create no significant burden to the regulator. Okay, that's all.
OK， 唔該，唔該，盧生。下一位係
Thank you. Next from SmartTone, Mr. Chen. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For SmartTone, in relation to the subsidiary legislation, we have got the following 2 points to make. First of all, in the past, for the 3G SUF, the fees were paid on an annual basis. It could be regarded as a recurrent expenditure, and so it was tax deductible. Now, for Section 3 of this piece of subsidiary legislation contained in Legal Notice 58, we have to pay on the basis of a lump sum payment in advance, and as a result, it can no longer be regarded as a recurrent expenditure and therefore tax deductible. As a result, this will increase our tax burden, and it means that the mobile network operators will have their costs being increased. And so as a result of this tax burden, the additional cost will certainly be shifted onto the consumers. This is the first point.
Wow.
The second point, the base for the auction fee for the SUF is problematic because it's now set at 48,000 per kilohertz at this moment, which is lower than the base of 66,000 of the current RFR spectrum, and we believe that it is in breach of fair competition. I would like to elaborate on these 2 points. For tax purposes, or because if we pay it annually, then we will be able to be tax deductible. But now, if we are to give the lump sum payment of SUF, the nature actually should remain the same except for the payment. But recently we learned from the tax department that if you pay it in one lump sum, then you're not subject to tax deduction. Well, we need to pay this as a capital expenditure then, and that would affect our operations. We don't want our operations to be affected because of the change in payment. I would like to make it clear here that operators are not requesting for any special treatment. We just want the authority to maintain the current payment methods, whether it be a one lump sum payment or an annual payment. We want to enjoy the same tax deductibility, and because this has been an ongoing for many years, if we're not able to be tax deductible, it would escalate our operating expenses by a few billion, and there would be no other choice but to burden this on our customers. The auction price is lower than the base of the RFR, and we believe that this is actually not considered as fair competition, because the opening price is 48,000 per kilohertz, but for existing assignees, they can choose to exercise the RFR at 66,000. We don't understand this, because this would be actually a preferential treatment to those new to the market. We believe that the opening price for the spectrum should be set at 48,000. Thank you. Next, we would like to invite from Hutchison Telephone Company and Ms. Suzanne Chang.
Of different treatment of the lump sum upfront payment versus the annual payment of the spectrum utilization fee. So the 3G spectrum auction in 2001 provided for the SUF to be paid on annual basis. And starting from 2007, the government changed the payment method from annual payment to the lump sum payment, simply because of the ease of administration work and facilitate early collection. Mobile operator made the first upfront fee in 2009, and recently the IRD, the Inland Revenue Department, reviewed these payments and expressly saying that they intended to treat these upfront payment differently from the previous annual payments. So at the request of the operator, OFCA wrote a letter to IRD to explain that this consequence resulting from the change of the annual payment to the upfront payment was unintended, and was simply to reduce the administration burden of the government in collecting the SUF payment. The IRD has replied to OFCA in the letter on May 20th of 2014 that the change in the treatment was only the consequence of the change from annual payment to an upfront payment. When the operator bid for the 4G spectrum in 2009, they were obviously unaware that, together with OCA as well, the consequence of this change. So operators had been paying the substantial amount for the spectrum payment, and the different accounting treatment of the SUF will unexpectedly increase the cost of the operations, as well as the cost of the spectrum as well. So while the operator are sympathetic to OFCA's intention to reduce the administration cost, given the nature of the SUF has not been changed, simply the method of payment, it is unfair for the operators that they should suffer an unintended consequence substantially disproportionate to the cost savings. Therefore, what we urge is to urge the government to reconsider if the SUF shall be payable on an annual basis instead of the lump sum payment instead. And if the government determined that the SUF should be paid in lump sum, the Telecommunications Ordinance shall be amended to explicitly state that these payments should be treated by IRD in the same manner as they were on the annual payment basis. So thank you, Chairman.
唔該。最後一位係獅子山學會。
Thank you. Last deputation, Mr. Andrew Shun from the Lion Rock Institute. Thank you. Well, after seeing the agenda of this meeting, I was a bit surprised, because according to the most recent survey, especially youngsters if you were to cut off 3G or to cut off water for showering, we asked the youngsters which would they prefer. And young people nowadays would rather choose to have 3G than water to shower. So actually, this is a very explosive topic. Well, I'm a news article writer, so I know the importance of heated topics. Well, the Lion Rock Institute, I see that we are the only deputation attending who's not in operation of the mobile network. The Lion Rock Institute really wants to maintain a harmonious society, and we strive to maintain harmony in this society. We're talking about existing assignees and also new operators who would like to join the market. Well, for the opening price, it doesn't matter where you set it at. You could even set it at 0. But as you all know, the 3G spectrum, there used to be 4 segments. I'm not sure whether when you set the spectrums in 2001, maybe in terms of physics, it's most effective, it's most optimal. But now you've set it into 5 segments. Hong Kong people would ask why you want to increase or try to divide it up into 5 parts. Well, maybe because you're thinking of a new operator. Yes, we welcome new operators. But then you will find later that there's only one new operator, and that is state-owned. Well, we all understand in Hong Kong, even for social welfare, once you talk about the mainland and Hong Kong, we would only go into controversial topics. Well, and if this new operator that is state-owned can enjoy a lower fee than the existing operators, what would Hong Kong people think? The mainland Hong Kong people conflict is not only limited to the Sheung Shui station for those parallel importers. We should all work together to ensure that we could restrain the conflicts. The Lion Rock Institute, well, why we call ourselves the Lion Rock Institute is because we really look forward to innovation. Many members of the Lion Rock Institute said that the IRD is a very effective department. It's very difficult for them to make changes. Why would it suddenly give rise to the problem of tax deduction because of the change in payment? Well, I listen to OFTA. It's because of administrative convenience. Well, administrative convenience from 1997 till now, it has already stated that there are many hidden bombs that have caused conflicts. Well, so I was thinking, if there are 5 spectrums, you will need to send 5 checks to OFTA every year. How heavy would the administrative burden be? Would it be like giving out $6,000 to every Hong Kong resident? Well, I don't know. Some multinational companies, their cash flow in 36 hours could exceed the income of all these mobile operators. So how heavy would that burden be? I just want OFTA to listen to our views, to listen to the views of non-industry institute. Thank you. Well, we've received a response from the administration dated yesterday. I think that you've all received it. It's a brief response to the 2 points just now. Perhaps we could ask Mr. Wong to explain it, and then you would be able to pose questions. But I hope that members would declare interest, especially if any personal interest in relation with these mobile network operators. Mr. Wong, please. Thank you. Well, there are a few views right now. The tax deduction issue, to see whether we could continue with the tax deduction, the payment method, to maintain the existing method, or whether the price of the SUF would be too high. So I would like to give a brief response, and I hope that I will be able to make myself clear. First of all, on tax deduction, I would like to make clear that this is not a commitment from our end. I remember that in 2001, it was because there was a query from the industry that OFCA invited views from the IRD, and in the tender it was written very clearly that all tax-related purposes would be individually handled by their respective tax experts of the operators. But regardless, when we set our fees, it's the same with anything that has to do with government income. We would not especially consider tax-related issues. And this is similar to what we usually do. Otherwise, we would have done the job of the IRD. The IRD is independent. It is up to them to see how they would charge taxes, and they have their own mechanism in dealing with any disputes related to tax. If there are differing views, you could also go through other channels to deal with these disputes. For the SUF, you said that many of you said that it's not consistent with the payment method since 2001. Ever since 2007, all publicly tendered auction spectrum have been paid in a lump sum, and this is not anything new. In the past, we've also consulted the public on the lump sum payment, and most views we received were in favor of this method, and there are some industry, members of the industry who were in favor of this payment method. And in the recent 7 to 8 years, we've arranged for lump sum payment. Yes, there would be an administrative convenience, because if we maintain the payment method we set in 2001, we would need to check our books every year, because you either pay the opening price, or you will need to pay a certain percentage of the operating cost, whichever was higher that year. Of course, I cannot say that this administrative work is a very heavy burden. Yes, it is possible, but it is a bit of an administrative burden on both the industry and us. And so at that time, we came up with the idea of the lump sum payment. So this explains why we think that the lump sum payment is more ideal. well, I have to emphasize that tax is not something we have to deal under this ordinance, because this decision is made by the RRD, and we shouldn't try to comment on the way they operate. But if there is a need, we're willing to explain from our end the payment method, and we could explain it to the related departments. We're willing to do that.
As to the level of the spectrum utilization fees, the SUF, it appears that the criticism is that for the auction price, the reserve price is $48,000 when compared with the $66,000 charged for the right of first refusal. It appears that we are being discriminatory against the existing mobile network operators. Well, I think it's a matter of whether others would also think that the existing assignees are being given an advantage because they are offered a right of first refusal. So, in relation to the reassignment, I think everything is interrelated, and we have to strike a balance. We are concerned about the impact on the continuity of the service, and therefore it's better to have this arrangement of first refusal, right of first refusal. Since it is a matter of right of first refusal, it's better to be clear about the fee level. Now, in the year 2016, you will have to pay for 15 years, and then it's better to have it fixed. And then for auction, we don't know what the final level will be like, because it depends on the outcome of the auction. For the reserve price, we are sort of pitching it at a slightly lower level than the RFR. This is to encourage new participants, and also at the same time we can avoid the concern as to whether we're trying to prop up the market. So the auction reserve price has to be pitched at a slightly lower level. There was also this concern as to whether it appears that China Mobile is being given some assistance to enter the market. Well, as to the final outcome of the auction, since we haven't got a crystal ball, we don't know who will get the spectrum and for how much. Even for China Mobile, it is already providing 3G service, though it is not a mobile network operator. It is hiring the spectrum from another operator. So much from me for the time being. I think it is very detailed. The floor is now open to members. First of all, Mr. Sin Chung Kai. We do have time, but still I will be watching the clock. For the time being, I'm not going to impose a time limit. It isn't a complicated issue. The two departments cannot see eye to eye. You have to sort out the matter. You can't simply say that it's not your business. If they can't get a solution from the IRD, then of course you will be approached. Yes, I think you talked about the arrangement having been imposed since year 2001. Currently, the expenditure is not tax deductible. Well, I think it should be rightly tax deductible. I don't think it is a matter of favoring any particular body. I think it's a matter of whether the expenditure can be regarded as tax deductible. If it cannot be treated in this way, then of course they hope that you can assist them. If you can't persuade the IRD, then is it possible for you to revert to the annual payment method? And then you talk about $48,000 and $66,000 and I hope I get the figures right. I don't think the difference is small. In fact, the difference is 37%. Is it possible to narrow the gap between the two amounts? Is it possible for you to make adjustments? I cannot agree totally with the submissions of the operators. $48,000 for the reserve price. I just wonder if you can have it pitched at $66,000. So my main point is that please try to narrow the gap. I think that's more realistic. So both questions are for the administration. Whether the payment is to be made on an annual basis. I think there are two questions here. I think the operators understand that the payment already made should be treated as paid sums. I think there's something that we cannot do anything about. It's a matter for IRD. So we should concern ourselves with the upcoming payment. I'm not good at doing business. Operators are better than me in doing business. Every time when somebody joins an auction as to how much you would be willing to pay, I think you will look at your cost, and tax burden will be part of the business cost. I understand it in such a way that for the SUF, it accounts for a very small percentage of the overall cost. I think it would only be about 3%. If you are singling out 3G service, then the SUF would account for an even smaller proportion of your cost. As to the impact on citizens, I do have reservation about such an argument. In the past few years, we have had auctions. Had the argument been justifiable, we would have seen higher and higher service charges. But the fact is, on the contrary, to the contrary. For the tax burden, I think we have to strike a balance. Of course, I don't want to resort to the statement that people would suspect that it is a matter of collusion between the administration and the business. I think it's better to have a lump sum payment in advance. I think that's the best option, and that's why since 2007 we have been making the same arrangement. We would not be interested to know whether that would result in a higher tax burden. Equally, I won't ask for another approach if I see that it results in a lower tax burden. Now, $40,000. I'm sure whether we swap, even if we are to swap the two fee levels, will be criticized. I think we can have the middle of the road approach. Of course, you would want to raise it from 48,000 to 66,000 for the sake of the public coffers. Well, until we have the auction completed, we don't know how much it will be like. We are still making a guess only. We are still exploring ways to determine a fee level or to determine a price level for kicking off the auction. We have made reference to the fee levels during two periods of time. In the year 2011, there was the auctioning of the spectrum for 3G, and then for 4G in 2013, there was also an auction. And in fact, 4G has become more mature, and not to mention 3G has now become the mainstream technology. For 3G, I think that on that occasion, the fee levels were on the high side. Because the transmission was better, and that's why we have come up with some adjustments. So for the one in 2011, we tried to halve it because the transmission was better. And then we also took into account the one in 2013, and we averaged out the two. As to whether we can pitch it at $49,050 or $51,000 is all a matter of judgment. We believe that 40,000 and 66,000 would be about right. Equally, for it to be to go from $66,000 to $86,000, I think again it is a balanced approach. If I may add one more point here. You didn't impose any time limit, right? Just give me 1 more minute. You have said that you don't think that the difference is huge, but I think it is too arbitrary. It's too arbitrary. The difference is huge. It is not desirable. You have tried to answer all the questions, but it's a matter that we don't agree with you. Now, for the legal advisor, can we seek an amendment to the subsidiary legislation? It's a matter of yes or no, we vetoed it, and then they have to come back or again, or whether we can move an amendment. Well, it is a matter of negative vetting as far as the subsidiary legislation is concerned. So you can seek amendments, and this is in line with the provisions in Section 34 of Cap 1 of the laws of Hong Kong. In accordance with Section 34, for you to seek an amendment, it must be in line with the powers of that piece of legislation. So it may be amended. So the payment method should fall into this category. Yes, I believe that it is the same as the power, the power to make the legislation. What about the other point? It may involve something else. We may have to consider whether there is a charging effect. Charging effect. It depends on how the authority considers the matter. Charging effect means that the government will incur expenditure additionally or receive less. So for us to raise $48,000 to $66,000, it will be fine, but not the other way around, is it? So, well, they haven't started charging the fees. I'm not too sure whether it is to be charged by the administration. Well, after it's a statutory body, I think it's still being run on a trading fund. Let's not have a dialogue between the two of you. What about Mr. Wong and your lawyer?
Well, where does this money go? It goes to the treasury. It's not for after. Well, if councillors have this view, then of course I must go back to seek legal advice. But on the spot, it seems that it would affect our fees. So this is my concern. Thank you, Mr. Wong Teng Guang. Thank you, Chairman. I would like to ask the administration the fee of the use of the spectrum in other countries. Are we charging more or less? That's the first question. Second question, the spectrum that the government is going to take back, the existing operators, can they auction for it? In my understanding, I think they should be able to do so, but I want to hear your response. Well, if they're eligible to auction, then, well, if the auction price is 48,000, of course they could use 66,000 to auction for, and of course they would be able to get it, because of course they wouldn't want to give it to a new operator. Because if I'm in the business, if I am willing to pay, 100 million, of course I would be able to get it. So I'm, as the operator, of course, must calculate my cost. Of course, you might need to charge the customers more. And if you charge the customers too much, then it would lower your market share. So this is the way you do business. I want to ask these questions on the fees of Hong Kong compared to other countries, and to confirm whether the existing operators can participate in the auction for the spectrum. Well, second question is very easy answer. Yes, the existing operators can auction for it. So anyone, including me, if I'm willing to pay, then I can auction for it. Well, do we need to make it clear that there is one extra? Well, aside from PCCW, because recently there's been a acquisition, because they've been merged with CSL, and when after said this, they set a number of criteria, and so they would not be able, this is the only company that would not be able to participate in the auction. So, well, that's a special case. Yes, for the other existing operators, yes, they could auction, and the auction reserve price is the same as the new participants, 48,000. Yes, so there shouldn't be any problem of unfair competition. Your other question regarding the spectrum fee, whether it's high or low, well, personally, I don't have this information on hand, but I know that it's very hard to compare Hong Kong with other places, because if I remember correctly, an operator previously hired a consultant who said that if you pay 20 million, it should be about right. I want to point out that Hong Kong's situation is really quite unique. Why? Our mobile phone fees are the lowest in the world, according to a survey. So it's very difficult for us. And as you know, the network is very dense because Hong Kong is a very small place, and therefore the situation is really quite different. If you use a direct comparison, it's difficult to compare whether it's considered high or low. The SUF would be set via the market mechanism. If operators think that it's worth it, then they would be willing to pay more for the spectrum. The SU fee paid currently by the operators account for only about 3% of their expenses, and they do have a certain profit every year. The Lion Rock Institute, Mr. Xun, said that the reassignment of the spectrum involves a China Mobile. is it for sure that China Mobile would get the new spectrum? Is this decision already made in advance? Well, no, of course not. Well, will China Mobile participate in the auction? We don't know yet. But Mr. Xun just now talked about the conflicts between the mainland and Hong Kong. So it has nothing to do with it. Well, I just want to point out that China Mobile already provides 3G service. It just doesn't own its own network. It's using another operator's network, but it's already providing 3G service. So it's like other companies. It already provides the same service. Well, so if you rent, then you won't be able to buy your own property. Is that right, Mr. Ma Fong Kwok? Well, I have a few questions. First one, I'm not quite clear why this issue of tax would be raised by the current operators, because this has been ongoing. Why would you think that it's unfair today? Because these are all big companies. Your finance department, when you auctioned for it many years ago, should have calculated all costs and expenses. A second question is for the administration. How did you come up with the number of 66,000 based on what circumstances? So when you set this level, did it include charging it on a lump sum payment method? So is this part of the criteria? Well, these two questions first. Mr. Chan, you've raised your hand. Perhaps you could go first. Well, let me give you some background information. Starting from 2007, spectrum auction was paid in a lump sum, but before 2007 and when we started in 2001, it was done annually. Well, I know the history. Well, after 2007, we paid the lump sum, but in our understanding, our finance department or tax experts gave us the opinion that the nature of this was the same as before, so it should be considered an operating expense and that it should be tax deductible. Well, we've always been enjoying this tax deduction since 2001, and as I said earlier, we're not asking for a special request or special treatment, because all along we've been receiving tax deduction ever since from 2001. So why today you would ask about it? Well, but starting from 2007, it's been changed to the lump sum payment. But the IRD only notified us recently that the 2007 lump sum payment could not be tax deductible. So what was the reason? Well, this was is that if it's a lump sum payment, then it's a capital expenditure and not an operating expense. And under the IRD ordinance, capital expenditure is not tax deductible. So what is the financial impact? Well, for us, I don't quite agree that the impact is minimal. In the past few years, the lump sum payment we've made, including this 3G spectrum, let's say we got it at the reserve price. Of course, we're talking about 1.8 billion. In the past 2 years, we've given 1.4 billion. So altogether, it's a 3.2 billion SUF. You're talking about a tax of 16.5%. The tax would be close to 300 million. No, just a smartphone. 300 million of taxes. Well, I don't think you would think this a small amount of money. In future, well, there's some tax spectrum that we are paying on an annual basis, but in future, when we need to extend the spectrum, the payment would be switched to the lump sum payment, and then the tax deduction I'm enjoying right now would not continue. So your question is very good, Mr. Ma. Why we're so concerned with this now? It's because we received notification from the IRD recently. Well, we've always been deducting those taxes, but now we've been notified that the tax would not be deducted. Well, starting from 2007, you've been, well, you know, the IRD usually, you know, they have many years to pursue unpaid taxes. So, you know, they have this method of doing this later on. They don't necessarily look at it every year, but they have notified us that it wouldn't be tax deductible starting from 2007. So from your perspective as an operator, in 2007, what was your understanding of the tax impact? Well, it's very easy. Perhaps the others can supplement later on. As I said earlier, these SUF nature has maintained the same all along. We've auctioned for the spectrum from the government to use, and so we pay the SUF to us. The operating expense maintains the same, so we continue seeking for tax deduction. We've been enjoying this tax deduction since 2001. The IRD has agreed to this from 2001. Well, yes, 7 years ago, you had this understanding, and now the IRD has given you a new perspective on that. Well, you know, all of you operators can work together and seek legal advice together. But how about in the future? You would have a new business plan. So you would make an estimate of knowing that in future you might have to come up with a new method. Well, now you're in the business, you know that there are no more new risks. You already know the worst situation. Well, if you win the lawsuit, of course, that's great. But you will be able to estimate the future costs. Well, that's very simple. Oh yes, we understand the risk in business. If you're not able to take risk, then you wouldn't be able to work in the mobile network market. As said earlier, Hong Kong enjoys the lowest mobile phone charges. And every day we are faced with huge competition and policy risk. We understand this. But you shouldn't say that any changes made by the government should be blindly accepted by us. I think otherwise we don't need to attend this meeting. Because if the government can make the ultimate decision, then you know there is no use us coming here. Yes, the government has conducted some consultations, quite positive ones actually. mobile network operators have been objecting it all along. We have never agreed to the SUF. We would continue objecting to it if we think that it is unreasonable.
Well, I don't think you can argue that since we're in business and so we have to bear the business risk. Of course, we are willing to bear the business risk. Otherwise, we would not have engaged ourselves in mobile network service. Now, the payment method has been changed insofar as SUF is concerned, and this has resulted in an increase in the tax burden. We are not seeking a change. In fact, we just want to retain the consistency for the tax deduction. We used to enjoy the tax deduction. Now there is this renewal, and we want to be able to have tax deduction again. Now, of course, if the government is to say that we are no longer entitled to the tax deduction, I think the government can change the law and change the tax rate and increase the tax rate. I think the government has the right to do so, and we are also entitled to say that we object to it. Mr. Ma, there will be an auction for the reassigned spectrum. The reserve price is lower, and so it could be cheaper than your RFR, but it may also be higher. But still you enjoy an advantage because you have already got the facilities, you have got the equipment, and probably they have already reached the end of the period for depreciation. So even if there is a new market player, you stand at an advantage. Their SUV may be lower, but it can't be much lower. So I cannot see why you come up to say that you want to have competition, you want to change it, but you have had it for 7 years already. You're trying to revert back to what it was like 7 years ago. I cannot see the logic. I'm not saying that the government is right, but you have had opportunities to approach the government, say, taking a legal action and try to take the IRD to court. Of course, there are many different channels for businesses. I think coming to the electrical is one of the ways to go about it. Mr. Low, I think it is not quite clear. The IRD has taken a position. It's a matter of whether the IRD would like to regard the SUF as capital expenditure. Please try to avoid mixing the two languages to facilitate interpreters. If the expenditure is regarded as capital expenditure, then it will not be tax deductible. But then there are many factors at play. Say, for example, the payment method will be a decisive factor as well as to why we have only come out at this moment to change the payment method to annual payment. This is because it is only recently that the IRD has asked one of the operators to address the problem. OFTA has also written a letter. We have tried to clarify as to whether we are entitled to tax deduction. And it is only in this month that we are told clearly that lump sum payment is not subject to tax deductibility, and that's why we're saying that in the coming period we don't want to have lump sum payment because this payment method should be changed, and that's much better for us to argue the case with the IRD and allow for the payment to be treated as tax deductible. It is very difficult to argue with the IRD because the law is silent on whether the SUF is the tax deductible or not. Thank you. Next, Mr. Christopher Chong. For the industry to raise this point, I think it is quite interesting. But then,
因為個問題就係話，而家稅局同埋
it is not directly related to whether we should support the subsidiary legislation or not. I think it's a matter of differences in the understanding of the tax status of the payment. Perhaps we should ask the IRD and OFTA to come so that we can have a debate, and then we can try to clarify the position for the industry. In the past, it was in the form of annual payment, and then there was also annual tax deduction. I hope we can do something for the industry. As to the reassignment of the 3G spectrum and re-auctioning, I think it's a separate issue. Mr. Chung, then where should be the forum? The ITBP, I can write to Mr. Raymond Wong and ask him to convene a meeting to look into the matter. I think Mr. Ma also asked a question. Maybe the admin hasn't given an answer. And what about Mr. Chung's suggestion? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For Mr. Ma's question, I think he would like to know whether we have talked to the industry concerning the price for the RFR. Well, it wasn't $66,000. In the beginning, we did suggest a figure of $77,000. Now it is $66,000, so it is a lower level. For the Commissioner of Inland Revenue, the Commissioner can exercise his powers in accordance with the Inland Revenue Ordinance. For the ordinance before us, it isn't about tax matters. It isn't about how the Commissioner of Inland Revenue should rule as to whether an expenditure should be tax deductible. So if it is a tax issue, then it should be resolved within that context. It's much better to have that taken up there than have it done in this context, because it is not desirable to consider the tax burden on the mobile network operators when it comes to SUF. Otherwise, the public will become concerned. The mobile network service operators have also talked about the impact of the tax burden. Well, the whole sum should be regarded as a lump sum to be paid in 15 years. Mr. Wong Ting Kwong, Mr. Chairman, well, this is a subcommittee dealing with legislative amendments. For the law itself, I think it's a matter of reassigning the spectrum. For the operators, existing operators, as well as the new operators who succeed in getting the spectrum, I think they should be given the same treatment. Whether the expenditure is regarded as capital and so tax deductible, I think is a matter for the Financial Affairs Panel, and it isn't really related to the work of this subcommittee. So that's our main concern. I think all members have noted this. For the lawful and legitimate interests, we are aware of them. Well, for tax matters, perhaps we should ask colleagues like Starry, who is an accountant, to tell us clearly about the crux of the matter. Maybe I can raise this point at every panel meeting and press for an explanation. I think there's a more realistic way to go about it. For the legislation, I don't think you should expect any sort of solutions concerning the tax matters. Thank you. So either the IRO should be amended or the lump sum payment should be changed into an annual payment. And so the second point is somewhat related to the scrutiny of the subsidiary legislation. Mr. Sin Chung Kai, the last to raise his hand. I find it strange for the expenditure to be regarded as capital expenditure. Well, in fact, we are talking about lump sum payment, so it should be regarded as expenses. Now, if you buy a property, then of course it is in the capital account. But for the spectrum, I don't think you can resell it. So can it be regarded as an asset in your balance sheet? I don't think you can resell it, but you can rent it. After, can we resell it? Let me explain. No, you cannot resell it. For the hiring services, it isn't really a matter of renting out the spectrum. It's a matter of allowing others to hire your capacity. So it will become an asset and it is subject to yearly depreciation. Mr. Low, please speak closer to the mic. Every year we have deductions about the depreciation. Well, there are many factors determining whether it is a capital expenditure. Lump sum payment or payment by installment has been cited as one of the factors. But then there should have been other factors at play. But then this is the easiest approach. Now, since we see that this is the basis of the ROD's decision, so we would like to revert to the annual payment method. Before you approve the subsidiary legislation, we hope we can seek a change. For us to approach the IRD and argue with the IRD as to whether it should be regarded as an asset, then I'm sure it is very difficult for us to win the debate. In a moment, Mr. Ma will also ask a question. When there was the first auction, payment was made annually. I can still remember. But of course, I haven't studied the matter to a great extent. In the year 2000, the spectrum was auctioned. We have been told that you would like to lower the administrative cost. But I think they seemed to have given us an impression that this payment would be tax deductible. You shake your head. I won't say that you are telling a lie because I can't actually recall what was said.
Well, if we are looking at this with common sense, there is a tax ordinance, but yes, this is very clearly an expense. And of course, the operators would hope to enjoy a tax deduction. Often think that you could reconsider, because if the IRD cannot provide them with this convenience, can you help them with it? Yes, it might be more inconvenient, more of a hassle, but they think that this operating expenditure, might be better than paying all these taxes. And I think you could actually create more job opportunities, just hire a few more accountants. Mr. Wong, I would like to clarify that in 2001, in the tender papers, it was stated very clearly that the individual operators would have to seek their own tax experts. And I remember that the papers explained why a yearly payment was arranged. I remember that 3G at that time was not a mature plan. It was only the beginning of the 3G development. And the economy was still in the recovery process. We did not want to give a huge financial burden on the operators, and it was because of these reasons that we decided to arrange for payment on an annual basis. We didn't really think about tax issues. Well, you talked about different departments. I understand your point, but I have to emphasize that I cannot make the decision on IRD. No, don't put words in my mouth. Well, I'm saying that, since the IRD cannot do anything, can you, on your end, ask for annual payment so that you can convenience the operators? Well, I'm not trying to put any words in your mouth. I have to clarify, I'm not trying to do that. I just want to explain why we don't want to change the payment method. Because the IRD has its own ways of dealing with issues, including what they consider capital expenditure. But for our side, we usually don't consider tax impact. We just look into how payment can be made more smoothly and at the minimum cost. And this is not something new. We've already started this in 2007. Well, I think Mr. Wong's meaning is that if they change it back to the payment on an annual basis, it seems to be making a special arrangement to help them to relieve their taxes, and that might incur other consequences. Mr. Ma Fong Kwok, well, to me, I think a major impact on operators would be the cash flow. We talked about 1 odd billion. You're not talking about losing it, all this money. Or let's say when would the license expire? 15 years. Okay, 15 years. Well, let's look at it in the next 10 years. So you're only talking about 66 million per year. But each year, you would still take out that 66 million. That would still be your depreciation. I don't think the impact is as large as you put it. It's just that you will need to leave this huge amount as your capital expenditure. What you're losing is the interest of this lump sum. Because you're such a big company, you'll still be able to receive funds from the bank. So we're not talking about a difference of 1 odd billion. I'm not sure whether my understanding is wrong. Well, I think that we've repeated it quite a few times. Mr. Chan, perhaps you could address this question. Yes, it's mainly cash flow. cash flow plays a very important role in any business. Without cash, you would need to close down your company. You might still make a profit, but you wouldn't be able to operate. So you cannot underestimate the importance of cash flow to any company. Each year, of course, yes, it would do. But even with the depreciation would not let me pay less taxes. Mr. Low, well, even if you borrow money, if you use the bank interest to buy this spectrum, you wouldn't be able to deduct tax. So the problem is that, for large companies, it's not a lot of money, but of course they don't want to, because they don't want to pay that much money, right? So that's the problem, right? I'm also quite concerned with the operators in terms of the spectrum. Well, as it being a capital expenditure, it involves the whole issue of tax for the entire industry. So I'm a bit concerned with this. Well, we're not saying, who's getting the money or who's benefiting from it. Any company would be the same. It's not saying trying to service any company, instead to provide the service to the whole industry. Well, I think this is not directly related to our meeting. We have to deal with this with the RLD. Ms. Chang? Perhaps I could address the question of Mr. Ma. Well, to us, it's not only the issue of cash flow. Well, it would also show on our books, because if we're talking about depreciation, what we're paying is the same as our depreciation, and in our checks and balances, and you would see it on very clearly. Let's say the depreciation is the same as the amount we pay in taxes. If we're not able to get the tax deduction for our P&L, there is a direct impact. So it's not only the cash flow issue, it's an impact on the P&L. Well, it will show on our P&L. Any other questions from members? Well, we've already completed with the bill by bill scrutiny last time, and the operators have already asked many questions. I'm not asking a question. I just want to ask the legal advisor something. How about you? I just want to wrap up, but I would like to ask the legal advisor a question. Well, just now the legal advisor has answered part of it, but I have something I'll need to clarify. $66,000 to $48,000. It seems that you have. Is there no effect? I mean, can we make an amendment? When could? Well, I don't know whether the administration has any concern or issue if we raise this amendment. Well, this is quite complicated because right now, the government is also charging a fee. So the 66,000 and the current fee, whether there would be any that would incur losses, we will need to look into more detail, or whether this adjustment would incur extra expenses from the end of the government. Well, I think we need to look into this matter further. So the legal advisor cannot answer your question right now. I would perhaps ask another question. The lump sum payment, if you're able to amend this, would there be a charging effect as well? Because originally they're doing it just for administrative convenience and to reduce administrative cost. Well, my understanding is that if there's extra expenditure, but it's not too substantial, if it's not a substantial amount, then these amendments could be moved. But of course, it's really up to the government. If extra expenses are incurred in the change of payment method, then you would still need to make an amendment. Well, we could still write it up and then let the chairman rule. How about that? Mr. Wong and other members of the administration, do you have any supplement to make? Well, I think we'll still need to go back and seek legal advice. Well, I've just told you my perspective. These 48,000. 48 million reserve price at the auction. After would announce the auction requirements then. So I don't think any changes could be made. Is that right? Well, Chairman, well, it's a hearing today. Well, if you raise the reserve price, you would be affecting them. Well, yes, I don't understand, Mr. Sin, why he's saying this. Well, he could make a personal amendment. Why do we need to discuss this at a meeting? Well, we need to understand it because the administration has given us their response. If it's not in our ordinance, then it could not be amended. We need to know whether it could be amended. Well, we've already finished the bill scrutiny today. It's a hearing. We shouldn't make further changes. Oh, Mr. Wong, why don't you let me chair the meeting? We need to understand the situation. Mr. Sin, did you have any anything to add? Well, last meeting we finished with the scrutiny of the bill. Well, some members said that we shouldn't make any amendments, and I think we shouldn't carry out a hearing. But I believe that this is something we should do. So deputations have attended the meeting today. Well, no matter what the final decision is, at least we would give people the opportunity to speak out. And we are now discussing what is related to the bill. So how can you say that it is not relevant? We would try to understand further with the administration if a member wants to make any amendments, what can be done and what cannot be done.
On
the 18th of June, at the meeting of the Legislative Council, I would move a motion to extend the scrutiny period till the 9th of July 2014. And then I would like to tell you about the timetable. For me to report to the House Committee, it will take place on the 27th of June. For you to give notice to amend the subsidiary legislation, you need to do so before the 2nd of July. And then for you to move the motions, it will be on the 9th of July. And then the regulations will come into effect on the 11th of July. So the deadline for giving notice is the 2nd of July. It may take time. If we move an amendment, does it mean that the admin would come back with a reply? Will there be an impact on the timetable? Legal advisor. Mr. Chairman, all along the President's arrangement is that if we receive a notice from a member to amend a piece of subsidiary legislation, the admin will be notified, and then the admin's reply will be considered by the President before making a decision. In terms of the timetable, I don't think we can say with certainty. Mr. Chen, I think it's already sort of the end of the meeting. We have already sort of finished with all the questions and answers. $86 million isn't a figure in the subsidiary legislation, or rather $48 million isn't in the subsidiary legislation, but then 66 is in the legislation. It is amendable. If there isn't anything else, that's it for the scrutiny of the subsidiary legislation. Thank you.